You also had another moment in Antigua where you took 5 for 61 in the second innings after going for none for 124 in the first.
You really were just worrying about your own thing, Chandresh. Getting on with your own job and skill set to do stuff.
You were very sporting enough to accept the title, the Duckman, for your batting effort in Test cricket.
When I think back, those 3 deliveries, right on the butt. That one I bowled before that to Angola was probably one of my best Yorkers of all time.
Hello, everyone. I'm privileged to have Danny Morrison, a good friend, former New Zealand fast bowler, with me on the chat. Welcome to this chat, Danny. Great to have you with us.
Chandresh, good to be here, brother.
Danny, you started off at the age of 21 in international cricket. Your first match turned out to be dramatic because it was also the first time we saw a certain Mr. Sunil Gavaskar go belligerent. Were you shocked when he came out to bat and he batted in the way in your debut game?
Oh, right. That Reliance World Cup, wasn't it, of 1987? And that one-day international debut, freaky. Because of the situation and how India needed to get, I think it was around about 240 runs in a certain amount of time in those overs to then have a home semi-final. So it's funny, isn't it? You change the dynamic, or you create the situation that says to Sonny Gavaskar, you've got to play a bit like this. You have to play with a bit more urgency. And it just showed from the little master, what he could actually do. Yes, everyone will go on about, look, it was small boundaries, it was the old Nagpur, but, the way he played against someone like, and particularly Ewan Chatfield, who was, very much a very good line and length bowler. There was Willie Watson, there was Martin Sneddon and myself. But when you think about the way he played, and in a way, you think about that whole scenario, how it got set up beautifully for India to make that semi-final. They ended up playing England in Mumbai. So, he could play, and it just showed what he was capable of when he wanted to.
Were you surprised when you got picked for that 1987 World Cup as a 21-year-old?
Yes and no, because in a way they were looking for someone to be really blood and exposed, because Richard Hadlee was a bit more focusing on Test match cricket at the time, and this is late '87, and there was a big tour to Australia coming up, and also he was looking to that record of Ian Botham's was getting closer and all of that sort of thing. So Richard Hadlee really did map out what he was about to try and do and how much longer could he stay in the game of Test cricket. So I got an opportunity, and you could argue, could I have played a bit earlier in the tournament against Zimbabwe, I think in Kolkata? Probably tough, because you had Johnny Bracewell, you had Evan Gray, the left-arm spinner, and Stephen Bock, another left-arm spinner. And in that setup there, Chanders, was that Martin Sneddon, my club mate and state mate, Sned's opened the batting for a bit. So he came out and they used him as an opening batter a bit to change up the dynamic to fit in the extra spin when you had, another option with Dipak Patel, Johnny Bracewell, those 2 first choice guys, or would they pick Stephen Bock, or would they go with Evan Gray? We had so much based around the spin angle.
Who was your hero growing up as a fast bowler?
You get that asked a lot. When I think back to the 2 dynamic guys sort of going head-to-head, locking horns, was at Eden Park in 1977, which was the great Dennis Lillee and the great Richard Hadlee. And so watching that unfold and these 2 characters going head-to-head inspired me a lot. And so, I started out as a wicketkeeper because, there was, places up for grabs, or the coach says, why don't you try that? Because, wicket keepers are in the game, they're catching the ball, they're down the barrel, they're watching it all the time, and we really need someone who's, and you're quite a good catcher, Danny. So I started there, and then it was not until about 78, 79 that, I started to get more involved with bowling around that time of 79. So Dennis Lillee was such a big impression on me.
And to be able to bowl alongside Sir Richard Hadlee towards the fag end of his career, how big a moment was that for you as a youngster?
It was huge because in 1982, I was in my sort of second to last year in college. I was 16 and I was the vice captain in the first 11 cricket team, and 5 of us wagged school. We took the day off school to watch the great Aussie side there with, captained by Greg Chappell. You had Bruce Yardley, Dennis Lilly, Rod Marsh. You had always a Jeff Thompson, a very good side, Terry Alderman, and they were a great side. And then, New Zealand with Richard Hadley, and I think Jeff Howth was captain, and Wright and Edgar and those sort of guys. And it was a great time to be around watching that. So we wagged school to go and see these guys in that Eden Park Test match of 1982. Fast forward to late 1987, and here you go. Nearly 6 years later, you were playing with a guy that you really looked up to as a hero because you saw at high school level. To then be alongside was remarkable. And when I look back on that, there are those times when you pinch yourself and go, wow, felt like a dream, felt so surreal, but was just a blast.
So, Danny, the next big thing that I want to talk about is the 1992 World Cup. How many of you in the team were aware that Deepak Patel is going to be opening the bowling? Margaret Batch is going to go hammer and tongs right at the top. And when did you realize that, Deepak's actually going to be using the new ball?
Not really until that first meeting, because I think, Marty Crowe and Warren Lees, the real think tank of it, were trying to come up with something different. We'd lost 3-0 to England leading into that World Cup of a mini one-day series. So when I look at it, they probably felt that because of the lack of pace of our pitches, they were going to go with spin on it, something unique, something very different to surprise and shock the opposition that at that time were all used to facing quick bowling with the new balls inside the first 10 overs. So your wonderful coup. And I think a lot of us were, in a way, kept in the dark. Dipak would bowl with new balls or bowl in the nets and that. And you really were just worrying about your own thing, Chandresh, getting on with your own job and skill set to do stuff. And those sort of strategies were left up to Crowe and to Warren Lees, the coach. So, hats off to them. It was a wonderful ploy, and it was a great strategy.
How difficult was it to get over the loss in the semi-final, 92?
It's a funny thing. I mean, look, of course, we were all so down, but it was to the end of our series. It was right at the end for us down under with our season. And I look back at it, and in a team meeting we had, our goal was to make the semi-final because it was just the round robin stuff, and then your last 4 teams like the semis. And for us to try and make a semi-final was a big thing because we'd been so young. We had that whole Hadley retirement in the middle of 1990, and Martin Sneddon, Jeff Crowe, John Bracewell, Hatfield the year before, the great Richard Hadley. We lost a massive nucleus of players in the middle of 92. So here we were, just not quite 2 years later, that World Cup, sort of 18, 19 months later, we're playing that World Cup without those big names. And so it really was a changing and shifting of the guard. And for us to play that well, Martin Crowe to play beautifully, was the player of the tournament, won the car, all that sort of thing. He led beautifully from the front, the ploy of Deepak, changing the bowlers, Chris Harris, Roddy Latham with a bit, and the dibbly-dobbly and wobbly, as they were nicknamed on those slow pitches back then. It sort of worked. And we won 7 on the trot, then lost to Pakistan in Christchurch, and then had to play them again in the semi-final. So that, when you technically look at it, Chanders, they were the only side we lost to, and then they ended up winning the World Cup. So they beautifully peaked right at the right time. And look, sure, disappointing, but I think when you look back retrospectively, and I looked at that, some of the guys obviously crying and wading around the ground and saying goodbye and thanks so much. It was a wonderful month of our lives. And we stumbled at that semi-final, but I look back and it was such fond memories. It was a great tournament. First time in coloured clothing. It was all, before that was all in whites. And it was a really amazing time of our lives.
2 moments stand out for me in your test career. One against Australia in Auckland in 93, and then against Pakistan at Christchurch. You also had another moment in Antigua where you took 5 for 61 in the second innings after going for none for 124 in the first. How do you look back at those 2 wins specifically against Australia and Pakistan? Because both those sides were rampant sides at that time.
Well, let's go back chronologically from the reverse, if you like, from the West Indies, because that was right near the end. It was my only 5-wicket haul overseas, because I got a lot of 4-wicket bags, but we tended to share it around. And when I look at it too, the game of Test cricket was so much like a war of attrition. The modern game, they play more shots, Test matches get finished, they get results. We tended to play, as you know, Jan, in an era where it was dour, it was tough. You know, the pitches tended to be a bit flatter. The batting wasn't so aggressive. You know, you'd leave a lot more. You'd be stout in defence. So when you look back at that, that was a blast for me. So none for 100, as you point out in the first innings. And then because the pitch got a little bit more abrasive and we knew about reverse swinging by those early mid-90s, it worked for me and went around a bit and was lovely. And it allowed the ball to get older and you could shape it. And we used those dukes in the Caribbean at that time in 96. So that holds fond memories. And, you know, you're up against a very good side there. And I think I nicked out Lara there in one of those, part of that fifer. And he was, he was at the peak of his powers, you know. So that was very, very rewarding. And then when I look back to, was it Pakistan? And it was in Christchurch, wasn't it? A little bit before that. Very frustrating way, because I had a couple of drop catches early on. It probably would have meant I got a 10. I think I got 2 4s or something. I think I'd sort of vaguely remember I missed out on getting a 10 because I think it was and Rutherford got injured and he dropped one at mid-off off me, because he's normally in the covers or slip. And then Blaney, I think, dropped one. It's funny you remember the ones that are more about the drops rather than getting people out. It was the ones that, and so when I look at that Test match, it ebbed and flowed, and they were a great side. And part of me, you know, as much as it was a great time, you know, we were 2-0 down on the series, and you could argue they relaxed off. There was a lot of question marks about their Test match later on, where the guys were underperforming, all that sort of thing. But when I look back at the 2 Ws, man, they ran in, they bowled quick, and I remember them bowling very nasty to Brian Young, Blair Hartland, and even Shane Thompson. He got 100 too. And I remember Waka, that pitch was bouncing and whizzing, quite aggressive still, and, you know, we're going at you. And then I look at the other one prior to that, which was the Aussies of 93. You mentioned there getting that bang of wickets there at Eden Park, which was particularly pleasing because it was on my home track. So where I'm from, at Auckland, and it nibbled around a bit. And the conditions suited, lovely overcast conditions, perfect for a bit of swing and seam bowling. And I think Crowe won the toss, can't remember. I think we bowled first anyway. I do recall, I think we bowled first. And so that was a nice feeling, because a mate of mine, actually, why I remember, isn't it funny? People going about stats and they get very involved, and you talk to some guys and they can remember, you know, just like getting everyone out, certain guys out all the time. And then I remember my mate was getting married, and I went there. And why I remember this, because they were all excited, because I think I took my 100th Test match wicket in that Test. My mate was getting married during that Test, and I was about to get married after that season finished. So it was a lovely time, and that's more of the memory I have of being around at that time, of getting a few people out, yes, but it was my mate from school. We played first 11 cricket together. A guy called Warren Keane was getting married, and from straight after the game, I had a shower and that there, took a change of clothing because I'd taken my suit and met my dear wife-to-be at the wedding reception. Couldn't go to the wedding, playing Test cricket, but went to the wedding reception. It was good fun.
94, you got a hat-trick against India. How long did it take for you to realize that you've got a hat-trick?
Well, good question, because the hat-trick was split over 2 overs, and I'd taken, I think, a wicket on 5 and 6 of the previous over, and, you know, everyone just caught up in the game and it's ticking along. And then I gave my hat and sunglasses to the ump, and then realised, and then the noise started to take over, and the theatre of the place started to erupt, and I went, and then Ken Rutherford goes, mate, we'll have a couple of slips on, you know, come on. And I went, Dawn, yes, of course. Hello. It's a hat-trick ball, even though it's the start of a new over. There are 3 consecutive deliveries. And Mongia had got pushed down the order because they wanted to see, you know, Kapler got out, and then I think Ankolo, you know, is a big, strong guy, and he was going to give it a long handle and, you know, try and lift the rate. and Mongia got pushed down the order. So as it turned out, you know, and like I make no bones, and people laugh about it. And geez, all this drama, Chandresh, and an exclusive on your YouTube channel, admitting to being naughty with the ball and getting fined and being checked. I mean, we all knew that the W's were greater. They were just better than anyone else at it, you know. And so, in terms of lifting the quarter seam or scratching a little bit to make it go, those white balls. And remember, back then we didn't swap the ball after 32 overs or 34 overs, whatever it is. We had this old ball. It was beautiful, and it must have been about 42, I don't know, 43 overs old. Went lots. And so one had got roughed up anyway, because Napier's a very hard track. You've been there, McLean's Park, very abrasive, lovely green outfield, but tough, hard wicket, and would slide on. And so I remember, you know, we'd roughed it a bit and it went. And so when you look back to that time, that's what you knew, that the two W's were very good at it. And this whole thing around reverse swing and getting one side really rough and keeping the other side shiny, and the ball older was just magic. Plus, if you look at that footage, there's a bit of shadow across, so it's tough for poor old Mongia to face that. And you know, it was, when I think back, those three deliveries, right on the button. That one I bowled before that to Ancola was probably one of my best Yorkers of all time. I bowled a lot, because you watch the two W's and what were they doing, and Waka getting a bit lower on the clock, you know, instead of being up here at sort of midday, it's out there at about 1 or 2 and tailing it. So yeah, went with that, and it worked. And so it was a real blast. And of course, crowd went nuts, and it was a very close crowd, a bit like some of the grounds in India. It's a rugby ground, very small. So yeah, that was an exciting time as well, real blast.
Was it a common secret about what the W's did in the 90s, and did all the fast bowlers around the world try to pick it up from them? Would you talk to them?
Yeah. Well, not so much you can talk to them, because they're obviously not really wanting to expose that too much. But what had happened was in 1990 got exposed because Imran Khan wasn't playing that series. So in Martin Crowe, we took this very young side just after Hadley retired. Yeah, Chris Pringle, myself, Willie Watson, a guy Stu Roberts, who didn't really play much in it, but you had a lot of young guys in there. And we were watching what they were doing. And so we intercepted the ball in the test match in Lahore and could see, obviously, something had been going on the rough side, untoward. And so that's when we got involved in it. Okay, and then by Faisalabad being naughty and scratching the ball, went around corners, did crazy things. And so when you know, and you play on those flat pitches back then anywhere, it was tough to get people out. So the reverse swing, you can understand why it developed in the subcontinent, understandably so. And so, you know, people talk to you, you put a line, or, you know, tennis ball, you put tape on one side and it goes. Or if you put a smile, a big cut in a golf ball, that'll go and do a crazy thing aerodynamically. So, yeah, we sort of picked up on it in those early 90s. And by the time of that one-day stuff going on, particularly, I think more so in New Zealand, because we didn't have two balls like an Aussie. In Australia, you had two balls. We only had one in New Zealand. It got old quickly.
And were you happy when reverse swing was accepted as a key part of everybody's bowling arsenal later on? Everybody sort of accepted it later on.
Yeah, and look, and there was a lot of exposure around it, Chandresh. When I think back to people writing cricket columns, and former greats, and having a discussion about this and going, because there were photos, you know, you had, I think, different players biting it and, you know, having a go at the ball. The argument was then, okay, why don't we make the pitches, and they all pretty much already were very flat. And so he said, well, some of the guys said, look, if it's part of your anatomy, fingernail, teeth, biting it, let's make it a free-for-all, and then make the pitches good. And the spinners can still have a say. They can do their thing. They love the older ball. Fast bowlers now want that because they get the swing, if they're good enough to do that, can get on with that. So when I look at that, there was that transition period. Now they, you know, later on, they really did start to microscope it, get an eye on it. You know, then there was the thing with the, you know, the spinners and then the quick bowlers, with the degree of all of that sort of happening in the early 2000s. So again, under the microscope, more cameras, more technology, things started to change. But I think we all loved that in those mid-90s, where, if you like, the cat was let out of the bag a little bit, where the reverse thing, and people started to know what to do and rough one side up quicker.
There was a phase in New Zealand cricket between 93, 94 and say 96, when there were a lot of churning happening in the side. Ken Rutherford went out of the side. Martin Crowe was in and out with his injuries. Lee Jarmon becoming captain. And there was this big incident with Matthew Hart and Stephen Fleming in South Africa. How difficult as a senior pro was it for you to adjust to all these changes that were happening in the side?
Well, it was a very fragmented time, as you mentioned, Chandresh, and I was in and out of the side a lot too. Let's be fair, I had my first hernia operation when I was filling in for the great Wasim Akram at Lancashire in July, I think it was, 92. Then I had another hernia procedure in Auckland in 94, the end of the winter. After that tour of England, I broke down with a hamstring and a groin injury. And then I had another injury in 96. So you talk about that time zone in the mid-90s where Crowe, his knee, he couldn't guarantee his fitness, so he couldn't be captain. Rutherford had to take over. The side was very fragmented. It was very inconsistent. Jeff Howarth got sacked as coach. All those off-the-field activities. We were nicknamed the Wild Bunch. It was pretty out there and pretty crazy. But at the same time, you're playing for your country and you're professional, and for a lot of us were fit and really raring to go and wanting to make the most of this opportunity. And when I look back, it was a difficult time because of the changing of the captaincy. Then Glenn Turner came back as a coach of that time, and he was of a different era in a way, and it really changed. And the younger guard, I'm talking about Chris Cairns and Stephen Fleming and Adam Perori, Dion Ash, all those guys coming through were a whole new era. And even I started to feel on the outer of that, guys like myself and Great Batch. Rutherford left to go and play in South Africa. And Great Batch, Dipak Patel finished around a similar time to me. All of us older guys were starting to move, and this new brigade was coming in. And then you suddenly had Steve Rickson. They wanted a neutral coach, someone from outside the square, to get away from a New Zealander. And they went with Steve Rickson. And he, understandably, when I look back on it a little bit more retrospectively, frustrated and grumpy at the time, for sure. Me and others having to finish, not how we really wanted to. But, hey, no one writes the script. Whether you're injured or you're dropped or you're out of favour, life's not perfect. We know that. So, and there was a real shifting and change. And, Jamon got moved on. Fleming took over as the young captain. You could see that was that whole transition shifting and moving. And it was a frustrating, difficult time. But look, we also had some great times, had some good fun on the tour and played some decent cricket at times. Sadly, Chandresh, it just wasn't consistent enough for what the fans, and rightly so, what they demanded and deserved in a way.
You were quite sporting enough to accept the nickname, the Duckman. There's a story about how in '96 you got a tie full of ducks manufactured in your honor, and you went as far as calling duck collars for hunters. What was all that about? Why did you love that thing, and how did you take it so sportively?
Well, suddenly that crept up very quickly. The world record for ducks getting closer and closer to your dear fellow, Mr. Chandresh, the spinner, wasn't he? So he had the record. And so when I look back at it, I'm that sort of a character too, that for me, Chandresh, that whole essence of the game. No one's bigger than the game. And I played alongside Johnny Bracewell, Jeff Crowe, Martin Snedden. These guys were very good about being humble to the game. The game doesn't owe you anything. You owe it everything in terms of playing, traveling the world, staying in nice hotels, playing for your country. There's so many people, I don't have to tell you, I mean, you're the land of a billion and some, would, give their right arm to play, for your country, the game of cricket. And so when I look back on it, I batted down at, 10 or 11. I loved coming and doing the night watchman job. And about my focus, I suppose, at that time, people laugh and go, oh, no, you're just crap. But at the time about it was that I was going out there to do a job to survive for the guy at the other end, because he was clearly better than I was at batting. And so when I went there to do the night watchman's job, I loved it. You get the ball whistling around your head, the big W's and coming at you and bombing you, and then your Yorkers digging out. And if you could survive those, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, you've done your job and saved your teammate who was coming in at batting at, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6, coming in. And that happened to us a lot, I might add, too, Chandresh. We, got knocked over reg at the top. A lot of that changing of the guard when Johnny Wright retired and Trevor Franklin moved on, and, different guys were tried as openers in top order and then all that stuff. So I found myself doing night watch a lot, and then either, getting out for naught, getting knocked over, or the next morning you're still naught, not out, but there you go, nick one early, see you later. But I liked it, and we used to have testimonials because the game, Chandresh, wasn't as professional as it is now. So your state or province gave you, or basically it followed from county cricket in England. They gave you a benefit season or a testimonial season celebrating your career, and you put on functions to make some money, run raffles, hopefully put towards your house or pay off a couple of cars or, whatever it was to do to help you towards saying thank you for being such a good, loyal servant to this province or state, either Canterbury, Wellington, Christchurch. I was played for Auckland. Dipak Patel had a testimonial before me. Willie Watson had the one before Dipak. So it was a lovely, those guys celebrating their seasons. And so I came out with the duck tie, the duck collar, and then we had duck on the menu. So some lunches and dinners we'd have, you had cooked duck, and then you could have the chocolate ducks on the side as an after dinner mint chocolate duck. So we had a great theme around Danny the Duck, because you had Donald Duck, the cartoon character. So we just had the synergy, and I could poke fun at myself and just say, look, here we go. Didn't try to get out for naught. You're there blocking, and I got a few not outs as well. But there was you had the record at the time. We made a T-shirt, like you go to the rock concerts and you see on the back of the shirt where the venues are. Well, we stuck all those where I got all my noughts against 2 and all that. So we just were celebrating. We're having a lot of fun. It wasn't all just about so serious and isn't he a lovely chap and hoorah and well done. And mate, people used to give me stick, tell jokes, and I was the butt of jokes and having fun and really good anecdotal stuff at these functions. So I had a great time when I think back to it.
Please remember to like, share and subscribe the channel, and you can also donate and support the channel via the links mentioned below this video.